welcome. Welcome to the Washington Ethical Society. I am Emily Newman, my pronouns are she, her, and I am the officiant today. WES is one community united across time and space, gathering for these Sunday platforms to affirm our values and commitment to a better world. So I want to welcome those of you who are in the hall with us today, those watching now on Zoom and watching later on recording. If you are on Zoom, please check the chat for a welcome and various tips from Judy Myers, today's Zoom chat usher. And if you're here in the hall, and you would like an assistive listening device, please ask the sound team at the back. A special welcome to our visitors today. We'd love to get to know you and answer any questions you have. So get on our email list. You can fill out the connection form at tiny.cc/wesconnects, or send an email to wes@ethicalsociety.org. And if you're here in person, we invite you to stop by the welcome table after platform or just chat up anyone with a name tag. Folks can share joys, concerns, or sorrows that they would like to let Casey, the pastoral care team, and or the community know about by filling out the blue WES Care form that you can find on the welcome table. Fold it and either place it in the collection basket in the back or bring it back to the welcome table, or you can pass it directly to Casey. There's also a digital form at tiny.cc/wescare. So let's check over with Zoom. I saw we do have Grace, who had visited last weekend and is now on Zoom and hopes to be in person another time. Lovely. Another Emily is with us. Always lovely to hear. Someone, Doug from Free Thinking UU near Penn State was interested in this topic and decided to join us. And Judy, of course, our Zoom person is welcoming everybody. Ed welcomes everyone. Susan welcomes. Okay, great. Welcome. So it is good to connect and share this time together. Our opening words are from Ray Bradbury. There is more than one way to burn a book, and the world is full of people running about with lit matches. Today's opening song is I Could Write a Book by Rodgers and Hart, performed by Keith Miller. Thank you. Each week, we read our statement of purpose as a reminder of our shared values. If you're interested in taking a turn to read the statement of purpose, you can sign up at tiny.cc/readsop. You can read it here in person or make a recording that will be included in a future platform. Today's reader is Karen Storm. She is part of our chorus on our Global Connections team and now on our Buildings team.
The Washington Ethical Society is a humanistic congregation that affirms the worth of every person. We strive through our relationships to elicit the best in the human spirit. With faith in human goodness, we appreciate each person's unique capacities. We joyfully celebrate together and support each other through life. We nurture a sense of reverence and responsibility for each other and the earth. We warmly invite you to join our community of children and adults as we work for a world where love and justice cross all borders.
Thank you, Karen. As Karen lights our community candle, I invite everyone to join in our candle lighting words. May we kindle within us the warmth of compassion, the light of understanding, and the fire of commitment to build a brighter future for all. Let us enter now into the centering time for our platform. Each week, we ring this chime in solidarity with people around the world. Today, I am particularly mindful of the journalists risking their lives to spread information. As we listen to the chime, let us remember our connection to each other and the world around us. Let us open our hearts to compassion for those who suffer. And let us commit ourselves to the work that calls for our love. I invite you to close your eyes or soften your gaze to relax any tension in your body and to allow yourself to just be. Give your body a wiggle to shift and find a comfortable position. Bring your awareness to your feet, to your legs, to your hips, to your torso, to your arms, to your shoulders, to your neck, to your head. Your whole body is connected and the parts communicate with each other. Listen to your body and its needs to stretch. With one or more nourishing breaths, let us contemplate our rootedness and our relatedness. We continue our meditation in silence and in the music that follows. Thank you. Today's reading is Adrienne Marie Brown's We Will Not Cancel Us and Other Dreams of Transformative Justice. Movements tend to become the practice ground for what we are healing towards, co-creating. Movements are responsible for embodying what we are inviting our people into. We need the people within our movements, all socialized into and by unjust systems, to be on liberators' paths. Not already free, but practicing freedom every day. Not already beyond harm, but accountable for doing our individual and internal work to end harm and engage in generative conflict, which includes active working to gain awareness of the ways we can and have harmed each other, where we have significant political differences, and where we can end cycles of harm and unprincipled struggles in ourselves and our communities. Our platform speaker today is Senior Leader Casey Slack.
Thank you, Emily. I am, at my core, a linguistic descriptivist, which is to say that I think that words mean the things that we use them to mean. It offers a lot of slippery area for words to mean one thing to me and another thing to you. And so while I am fundamentally a linguistic descriptivist, I also find it really important to define our terms. I'm trying to thread something kind of narrow and delicate today, so let me start with some definition. It is censorship when the government does not permit speech. Censorship is a thing that only the government is capable of doing. Now, not just the government of your country, right? It is possible to be censored by the government of your state or by the government of your housing association, right? There are various censorships available. However, somebody calling you an asshole because you said something mean is not censorship. That's a different thing. What that thing is a question for later in our conversation. But let's start with censorship. Censorship is what is asked for when people seek to ban books. Not just to say, ooh, probably you shouldn't read that, or you shouldn't read that until you are a certain age, but this may not be in the library. This may not be in the school. When we redact the ugly parts of our history to make a pretty picture of what was, which never was that way. To pull language out of, for example, Tom Sawyer to make it more palatable, as if it wouldn't be maybe more educationally useful to deal with why that language is there and why you maybe shouldn't use it if you look like me. Censorship is when we say you cannot teach this, not because there is no scientific consensus on it, right? You probably should not teach religiously based evolution in a science class in a public school, because that's not what public school is for. However, there is scientific consensus that trans people exist. So we can teach that trans people exist in school, right? This little bit of difference about why we're not teaching it. You could also teach religious theories of evolution, or the lack thereof, in the context of a world religions class. You can say, people believe this, because people believe that, and that is true. You cannot say, this is what scientists believe, because broadly it is not. However, we see in Florida and Texas, and even attempts made right here in Montgomery County, right there in Montgomery County, We see attempts made to get rid of books and education that acknowledge the painful histories of race and genocide in our country. Trying to get rid of anything that acknowledges that gay, bisexual, trans people exist, right? You will often hear, and this is a little bit of an aside, but it's related. You will often hear people say, well, straight people don't push their lifestyle on everybody. I hear you laughing, so I understand that I don't have to explain that too far. If a teacher who is a woman married to a man can say, my husband, in class, and not only do they, but I have seen and heard some things in my time of heterosexual teachers having mini weddings in their classrooms, of build up to the teacher's wedding as a big event in actually quite small children's lives. If straight people can do that, then when I teach sex ed, I can talk about my wife. If you can do it, I can do it. Level. You will also hear that pushing on young people narrative just from books like Julian is a Mermaid, which is a book about a little boy who likes to dress up as a mermaid and is maybe thinking about what his gender is. However, one time, I witnessed relatives of mine watching their children play with each other announce that the children were flirting with each other because one was a boy and one was a girl and they were smiling at each other. And I said, ooh, friends, they're related. But also, they're two. 2-year-olds just smile. They like other people. People project all kinds of things onto children well before anyone has the opportunity to indoctrinate them into homosexuality or transgenderism or critical race theory, which I don't even know how you would teach to a 5-year-old. It's a law subject. Anyway, I'm getting away from myself. Let me come back. So censorship is a thing that the government does. Censorship is when the government says, you may not speak that way. Now, right now, our government doesn't do a lot of explicit censorship, but it does do a good amount of implicit censorship. You can see that in the massive difference in response from the police to actual Nazis marching in the streets of Charleston, Virginia, good Lord, C names. Charlottesville, I have merged all the names into one. Thank you. Okay, Charlottesville, Virginia. Actual, stated by themselves, Nazis, chanting, Jews will not replace us. Not a cop in sight. Black folks protesting the death of George Floyd. Cops everywhere. Milo Yiannopoulos, who was, I don't know, some right-wing grifter who was going around college campuses in about 2016, giving really incendiary speeches, riling up crowds of young men to make them activated about that they were going to be replaced by Jewish people and people of color and I guess lesbians. Totally fine, the university protects that speech. The University of California, a state institution, protects that speech. People show up to protest that speech. Cops. Interesting. Whose speech is actually being protected there? What are the cops doing showing up on university campuses and causing fights with college students? There is an argument that most of the people showing up at any of these protests are not actually members of the community. I don't buy it. I don't buy it because the numbers show that most of the people are actively students of that institution or another nearby institution. But also, universities make big show of being members of their community, being part of the whole area. And if you are a member of your community and you are behaving in a way your community finds unacceptable, your community is allowed to tell you about it. The right to assemble is an integral part of our right to free speech. And yet, it gets obfuscated, it gets blocked in all sorts of ways. Some of them aren't so showy as the cops showing up and beating up teenagers. Some of them are quieter. Earlier this week, I was digging through the filing cabinets in the WES office, which is, as you might notice, undergoing some transformation. And in it, I found a folder labeled FBI, CIA on WES. It is the best thing I have ever found in that office. It is mostly comprised of about 3 reports from the FBI and the CIA. One, in fact, signed by J. Edgar Hoover. It's a photocopy of it, so it's not the original, but wow, look at us go. They are Freedom of Information Act reports, which were requested in the 70s, in the early 70s, by Hank Gassner, who was then president of this congregation. They include belief that WES was a communist front, belief that WES was under the influence of Russians. My favorite piece of all of this is a sheet that is almost entirely redacted, but says on it, security concern, anarchy. I have a long-term dream of my own FBI file having just homosexual written across the front, but my new goal is security concern, anarchy. You have given me something to live into. But surveillance like that is also an attempt at suppression of speech, right? It's making a case to suppress somebody's speech. It was used to actively suppress the speech of many people, and as far as I can tell from what I have read, WES only got away from being actively suppressed because it was being internally suppressed by 5 to 7 people who were snitching. Interesting. I can't know their motives. I am personally strongly anti-snitching, but maybe they were just saving their community from undue interference. I'll give them that. But in other contexts, those same efforts, right, the exact same stuff that grows out of McCarthyism and on into COINTELPRO, ruins movements, gets in and causes people to behave violently where they wouldn't otherwise. I was living in Cleveland during Occupy Wall Street, and there was a notable story of 4 young men who got coerced into planning to bomb a bridge. Now that seems weird. How do you get coerced into planning to bomb a bridge? Someone who was a law enforcement agent, came into their encampment, made friends with them, and then pushed on them. If you were really a radical, you would. If you were really, you would. Young people are susceptible to pressure. They went to jail for a really long time. I don't actually believe in prison, so I can't say an amount of time I think they should have gone to jail. But I think if you were pressured by an agent of the state into behaving in a way that we can't know if you would have behaved on your own, maybe you don't go to jail for a long time. This is suppression of speech. All of what those men were doing before what they were doing was interfered with, was gathering in a public place, protesting for fair wages, protesting against the severe income inequality that continues to ravage our country. In fact, is somehow worse after Occupy than before. We can talk about if the tactics of Occupy worked or were a good idea. We can talk about if the tactics of campus encampments work or are a good idea. We can talk about if the ideas are well expressed or even all that good on their own. The interference, the censorship of the ability to speak is the problem. So now that we're a little clearer on censorship, I'm going to make a turn into something more complicated. See, because censorship is a little easy to define and see, right? The government does it. We see it when the government shows up to say, you can't say that. But what on earth is cancel culture? I don't know. I have some histories that you might not, though. So the concept of canceled comes, as far as I am aware, from Black communities speaking to themselves. It means we're not doing that anymore. That's over. For us, not this needs to be ended for all people always. We're not doing it. It gained a weird tone, I will say, in, I'm gonna say 2014 or 2015. And here is some of the story of how I was too much on the internet and knew too many things because I was too much on the internet. So in about 2014 or 2015, Stephen Colbert, who many of you probably watch and enjoy, he said something, and I did not bother to find out what, because it does not matter to the story. He said something about people of East Asian descent that he probably shouldn't have said. That's what I remember. That's all most people knew. A young woman on Twitter who was called Sui Park got very upset about what he said, and she has a right to be upset as a young East Asian woman about any degradation of her people. And she started a hashtag called Cancel Colbert. She meant cancel his show. She did not mean like end his personal life. She meant this person is being derogatory to people who are already downtrodden. And the network that carries that show should stop. People agreed with her, they were allowed to. Other people disagreed with her, they were also allowed to. But this shaped what people thought of canceling as, because this was big. This was no longer an intra-community conversation about what we're not into anymore, but was a inter-community conversation about what is and isn't okay in the public sphere. I will say also that in the wake of this, Sui Park faced truly horrific trolling. People said absolutely despicable things to her out in public. They doxed her, which is to say they found her home address and phone number. This is around the time of a practice called swatting developing. Swatting is when people who don't agree with you call a SWAT team on you in the hopes that they might kill you. This got really serious, really, really fast. And what Sui had actually said, and let me also, she was like 22. And young people know things, but none of us expresses ourselves particularly well all the time. And she did not expect the things she said to go as far as they did, right? I am very particular when I talk in this context because I know that there's a record, and I know that the things that I say can go much further than the context in which I said them. The internet is always like that. If you don't know, there is actually no saying anything private on the internet. Screenshots exist. People get around all of your safety features. You cannot say something inside on the internet anymore. It's part of why I've stopped saying much of anything on the internet at all. The other thing to know is that at this time on Twitter in particular, when Twitter was a big deal, the culture on Twitter was really, really snappy and sarcastic. One of the ways that you got attention for your account was if somebody said something mean to you, you would quote tweet it and say something more clever and perhaps meaner than what they said. I remember also a moment in about late 2015, early 2016, when a lot of us went, "Oh, that's not a good idea. I am making this worse," and stopped doing that. Because no matter how personally satisfying it was to dunk on someone, no matter how much people loved seeing you go for blood, that eats at you. That changes who you are. So the broad idea of cancel culture comes out of a slight misappropriation of African American vernacular English and a particular climate on a particular website at a particular moment, which is complicated. It then joins the discussion in the world and becomes almost meaningless. I think today, I don't think the word canceled means anything at all. It is, for example, extremely hard to believe that someone has been canceled, silenced, when they are telling you from the pages of the New York Times. When you are on your third Netflix comedy special, telling me how you've been silenced, I struggle to believe you. And it gets hard to talk about it because sometimes when people are saying that there is a cancel culture and they have been victim of it, they are simply saying that there are now consequences for the things that they say. That sometimes when they say something that is mean, someone tells them, "Hey, that was mean," and maybe they don't use such nice language about it. It is interesting that so many people who stand up and say that they are brave truth tellers are whiny babies the second somebody challenges them on what they said. These are people who would identify themselves as all over the political spectrum, actually. I think we recently saw a certain bleach blonde congressperson take a shot and then not be ready for the shot that got taken back at her. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes, Marjorie. And that might not be an appropriate way to handle conflict inside a community. It might not be a good idea if you are in relationship with someone to immediately up the ante. I'm going to tell a story that is going to feel unrelated. I'm going to tell you about the history of rap battles. So, if you want to, and I do, you can trace rap battles way back into history because there used to be, in what is now roughly Saudi Arabia, a number of traveling or itinerant tribes of people who we would now maybe call Bedouin. And they would travel and learn and write their stories in dramatic, poetic form, and then they would meet in the spot that now has the Kaaba in Mecca. And they would have poetry battles. They would get together to share their poems and see whose rhymes were the most interesting and who had had the most interesting journey. This was a community practice that was, it seems, competitive but friendly, where the goal really was having the best rhymes possible. That's how rap beef started, in my opinion. You move forward in history and people continue to write poems. People from intentionally devalued communities, particularly Black American communities, get together to make art in the ways that they have available to them. In schools that are under-resourced, where visual art is a little bit hard to come by because paint is expensive. Where maybe instruments are even hard to come by, but you can make a beat on your table and you can make a poem and you can come up with something that is hot, right? So rap battles and rap beef start that way. And as rap becomes a genre, we get little slices, right? Now, early on, it is hard for a rap beef to get big because hip hop isn't big enough for that yet, right? In the late 70s and early 80s, when rap is becoming a genre, really forming together, these things are happening in a club, on the street, on a mixtape you gotta buy out of the trunk of some guy's car. Notably, the vast majority of white people know nothing about it. As time continues, hip-hop becomes more popular in the dominant culture and things get more intense. I've talked before about my favorite hip-hop radio journalist, Jay Smooth, graduate of the Ethical Culture School in New York City. He recently released his first video in a long time, talking about why old heads, that is, older people who are fans of rap, why old heads hate the current beef between Drake and Kendrick Lamar. If you didn't know, there is a current rap beef between Drake, who is a Canadian Jewish rapper who used to be on Degrassi, and Kendrick Lamar, who is a native of Compton, California, who won a Pulitzer Prize for his album, Damn. Now, if it were me, I would not get into a poetry battle with a man who has a Pulitzer. I would not get into rap beef with the only rap artist who has ever gotten a Pulitzer. Kendrick Lamar is a generational talent, and my bias in this particular beef is obvious. But let me back up a little bit, because there is context that I need to give you before I talk about my qualms with the current rap beef. And the context is, as you get into the 90s, rap beef gets more and more intense until it has a very public body count. So in the 90s, you have a feud between the East Coast and the West Coast, which is really hyped up by a media machine that does not care about these people, right? A media machine that is busy making money off of selling the specter of the black gangster to white people. This becomes a feud specifically between Christopher Wallace, also known as the Notorious B.I.G., Biggie Smalls, and Tupac Shakur on the West Coast in LA, in Oakland. Tupac Shakur, notably the nephew of Assata Shakur, the child of two Black Panthers, and a graduate of art high schools himself. They both end up dead. By the end of 1996, they are both shot to death in public. We don't see a lot of public rap beef after that for a while. And when we do, it's kind of silly stuff like 50 Cent and Ja Rule, neither of whom are people who anyone thinks are like a great rapper, kind of taking little shots at each other, but nothing is serious. It is all very much kind of on a juvenile, I slept with your girlfriend level, which can lead to violence for sure, but it never does. It is always clear after that that we're having a friendly fight. This beef has been different. And I will not pretend that I haven't enjoyed it, but that I have had some questions about my enjoyment of it. What I have enjoyed is that in competition with each other, Drake, who is unquestionably a hit maker, and Kendrick, whose credentials I have already been clear about, push each other to do better and better and more at their craft. And when it is craft, some of it is beautiful. There are lines on Kendrick's 5 tracks that he has released in the course of this that are Maybe not deep, but so clever. And every now and then, very deep also. Drake makes a little bop. He can make you dance. He's good at that. But it gets really personal really fast. Like really personal really fast. And the accusations that start flying are criminal, and not just in kind of the normal way of, I'm a gangbanger, whatever, right? We know that that is something that hip-hop artists are encouraged to personify, whether it's true about them or not. This becomes, on Drake's end, an accusation that Kendrick has been abusing his wife. And on Kendrick's end, accusations with pretty clear receipts of improper behavior with minors on the part of Drake and other members of his camp. This includes a song which is an absolute banger called Not Like Us, which includes the lyric, certified lover boy, certified pedophile, and trying to strike a chord, and it's probably A minor. Hot lyrics, but oh, why are we doing this in public? Why are we doing this like this? And it makes me think of call-out culture. And it makes me think of cancel culture, and it makes me think of all of this. And it makes me think of something else, too. There's a comedian, his name is Hannibal Buress. Hannibal Buress was not a particularly famous comedian when he did a sketch in which he said that Bill Cosby was a pedophile. And he was right. And it was, for whatever reason, the thing that in years and years and years of people trying to call attention to what Bill Cosby had done, the thing that worked. I don't know what to do with that. I don't know what to do with the fact that sometimes you seem to have to say something loud and ridiculous in public for anybody to listen. But I still don't think it's a good way to behave in your community. Like canceling, rap beef was never meant for such a decontextualized stage. Never meant to be the way that we addressed real issues. Never meant to be the way that we started legal investigations. But sometimes it fills that role. Sometimes you say what you can say where you can say it because nobody's saying it. But these tools, and they are tools, get misapplied really easily. For example, it makes sense to me to call out or cancel people with whom you only have a business relationship. By this, I mean, Jerry Seinfeld does not know me or care about me. Jerry Seinfeld, however, feels that he has been canceled because he does not think that trans people are real. I will give him none of my money. And in fact, as Netflix continues to platform him and Dave Chappelle, who continue to have hours-long comedy specials in which they get to say whatever the hell they want, I will not give them my money, and I will encourage you to, if that feels wrong to you, not give them your money. A boycott is canceling. Those are the same thing. However, I'm going to pick on Peter because I know Peter can take it. If Peter says something messed up, and I say, Peter's canceled, Peter's out of here, okay, that might be a little too far. Now, if Peter says something messed up and someone says, hey, that was messed up, and Peter continues to say that same messed up thing, well, a community needs to have a way to say, oh, we can't do that, and until you do some repair, you gotta go away. But that is different from being unwilling to have a conversation, right? Sometimes people say things that sound to us messed up just because we're in different conversations, right? There was a time. Okay, if you ever get in your feelings about that social justice language changes incredibly fast, please feel eased by the fact that I almost can't keep up with the language we use about me. For a while, the common thing to do was to write trans with an asterisk after it, to imply all of the ways that that could be meant. Some people identify as transgender, some people identify as transsexual, some people identify as transvestites. Those are all words that you could use about your own personal self, but maybe you should not use about somebody else until they've told you to. So an asterisk. And then, suddenly, and without any reason that I could find, not only was that not the standard practice, but people thought you were being derisive if you did it. At that point, ask a question. What do you mean by that? Right? There is ongoing intra-community conversation among people of color about just the phrase people of color. Some people think it's weird. Everybody, in fact, has a color, and light-skinned East Asian people and dark-skinned African people don't necessarily have a lot of experience in common, except for that they're not considered white in this country, except for that for census purposes, all Arabs are, regardless of their skin tone. So what is even happening there, right? Yeah. So when we're having these conversations internally, right? If I hear you say something that sounds messed up, I am going to say, hey, that strikes me as inappropriate. Or if we have a close relationship, I might say, hey, friend, what the hell? I might use stronger language than that if you're maybe Adam. In that context, first of all, it's a question. It's a reminder that we're not necessarily hearing and saying the same things. It is also an ouch, right? I have in my life heard people use the T slur and not realize that it was a slur. The T slur is tranny. I can say that, most of you can't. They don't know. Hey, ouch, what? Oh, I thought that was just the word. Okay, well, please read some more. When you hurt people, they're not required to be nice to you. I will be, it's literally my job. But that is different. That is different from the thing that goes on social media in particular, and in communities that are not bound by any kind of shared ethic, which is a really performative desire to be the most correct person. That is useless. You will never be the most correct person, and being the most right person on the internet or in your housing association or in your condo board will get you nowhere. It will get no one anywhere. It just won't. We'll talk about one more term that gets wildly misapplied and has almost that same exact trajectory. That term is Karen. People will talk about someone being a Karen and what they mean. Well, let me give you some history. That word starts as literally there was a string of incidents where Black people were simply in a public place and white middle-aged women called the cops on them. So some Black folks on the internet and in person started calling that character of a woman who calls the cops on people who are doing nothing in particular a Karen. This gets picked up by the internet and pulled completely out of its context. There's another thing that happens to a lot of language, which is on its way through the internet, it gets picked up by like 10-year-olds who don't know what they're saying and just like to say it a lot. If you speak to anyone who is currently 10 years old, you hear a lot of horribly misappropriated African American vernacular English. Right now, they're saying "gat" to mean a big butt. The way they get there is that sometimes if a person sees someone with a big butt, they will say, "Gat damn." And the children decided that "gat" meant a big butt. So first of all, don't take your clues on what words mean from 10-year-olds. Second of all, if somebody is white and saying something that sounds like it was originated by people who aren't, maybe ask a bunch of questions. Maybe don't ever use that word. But back to Karen. So Karen gets picked up by 10-year-olds, 16-year-olds, and a bunch of people who have no context for what initially happened. And they start applying it to every middle-aged white woman that they don't like. It becomes simply misogyny, extracted from the context of a power differential and a specific behavior. A label which may not have been fair to Karens in the first place, but that had a utility and a specific meaning, becomes a thing that can be thrown like a slur, though it's not exactly a slur, at any woman, any white woman of roughly middle age, and who knows what middle age is anymore anyway, voicing an opinion that you don't like. Notice when the terms become just another way to shut people up who have been shut up over and over and over again. So I'm going to pull back through this. Censorship is the government saying you can't. The government saying you can't is a different kind of bad than a person saying you can't. And even if the government says you can say that, and the government ought to say, in my opinion, that you can say pretty much anything, because it's not their business. It does not protect you from the consequences of what you said. And sometimes the consequences of what you said are going to be people being mean to you. That is true whether what you said was true or not. However, if you notice that people with less social power than you are repeatedly telling you that the things you're saying are mean, disrespectful, derisive, if you are being called an asshole by a minoritized person over and over and over again, ask yourself some questions. At the same time, pay attention to your attachment to purity. Because what a lot of the actual negative effect of a thing you could call cancel culture is a symptom of purity culture. We often use purity culture to mean simply the culture of abstinence only and sexual purity, but it seeps into basically everything that we do and think. There is a right side and a wrong side and no space between the two of them. There are good people and bad people and no complicated people in the middle. I don't live in that world. Right? My joke is that I am non-binary, bisexual, and polyamorous. I have never made a choice in my life, and I will not. There is a lot of space in the middle. There is space in the middle about most things. There are some things that I have no middle space for. I have no middle space when what we are talking about denies the inherent worth and dignity of any person. No middle space there. That includes racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia, long, long list of phobias, right? Anytime we are saying that any person is necessarily less than us, no gray area on that. But a little bit, little tiny sliver of gray area, because here's the slimy sliver of gray area. I still think that bigoted people deserve housing and food and clean water. There is actually nothing a human person can do that would make me believe that they did not deserve a safe place to live, food that is not going to harm them to eat, and water that is not going to harm them to drink. Nothing. There is nothing a person can do that would make me believe that they deserve solitary confinement. Nothing. However, not wanting you to be in solitary confinement and thinking you can behave however you want in our community are different things. One of the problems that traditions like ours can face is that we want to be for everybody, but everybody's like a really big group of people. And there's this thing called the paradox of tolerance, right? Where there is a degree to which if you are tolerant of bad behavior, if you are tolerant of racism, sexism, you make it impossible for people who are affected by those beliefs to be in community. So you need to have space for people to be different and to have different ideas, but you gotta have boundaries. Most of our boundaries are about behavior, not about belief, right? You can think whatever you want in your head, but here, you are not going to talk to people any kind of way. Here, you are going to make an honest attempt to connect with people across difference, which means both that those of us who have a perhaps internet-created reflexive anger are going to just push that down a little bit, take a minute to take a walk before we come back to the conversation, find someone else and be like, hey, this thing happened and I don't know how to handle it. Will you come talk with this person with me? With me? With me, not for me. We're not triangulating. It also means that those of us who have more dominant identities, and most of us have a blend of all the things, right? Almost nobody is entirely privileged and almost nobody is entirely disadvantaged. There is way more combinations of things you can be than are actually imaginable in your brain at this moment. But when you are holding a position of some kind of power, when you are a white person receiving feedback from a person of color, however we feel about that definition, take a minute before you get defensive. Maybe avoid getting defensive altogether. If you are a man and you are receiving criticism from a woman or a person who is neither of those things, take a minute. There's been this big conversation on the internet about would a woman rather be in the woods with a random man or a random bear? I think it's a kind of silly question, but what has been illuminating is the way men have responded to women saying they would prefer the bear, which is to argue with their decision, which does not make you feel less like you want to pick the bear. If a queer person, a trans person, you get it. If a Jewish person is telling your relatively Gentile self that the thing that you have said is kind of out of pocket and anti-Semitic, listen to that criticism. Listen to it. Try to not internalize shame. Your shame doesn't do anybody any good, right? But try to let yourself digest that and take it as an invitation to be in better community with people, to figure out how to have hard conversations where we're not having to say, this is my position and I won't move from it. Because we all need to move. And we all need to figure out how to be together. This is a practice space for living in community. This is a space where we want to bring our favorite selves, our better selves, our whole selves. And we will maintain these boundaries, but inside the container of the boundaries. We gotta learn to listen, to hear before we react, to take a moment to respond, It is one thing to tell a stranger on the internet to go F themselves, right? It is another to tell a person you have to see in person. It is one thing to be hurt by a stranger. It is another thing to be hurt by someone you trusted to be in community with. I think I have done an okay job of threading this kind of complicated needle. I didn't get to everything. I try not to keep you here all day. There will be things that you thought that I didn't bring up. There will be things that we will have conversations about today and next week and a year from now that will change how I'm thinking about this. I know that in part because when I wrote the title for this platform, I felt differently than I feel today. I felt differently because it had been a while since I had reviewed my thoughts on the situation. I feel differently because I got to have some conversations with people who told me about experiences they were having of feeling shamed or unable to speak because of the intensity of absolutely everything. My hope is that we can be changed by each other in a way that moves towards community, that moves towards love, that moves towards not just tolerating our differences, but really, really loving them. I love so much that none of you is me. One Casey is perfectly enough for the planet. I love so much that each of you is exactly who you are. That some of you have really great earrings all the time. And some of you write really interesting papers and bring them to me. And some of you always have a suggestion of somewhere Caitlin and I might like to go. And some of you are making beautiful art. And some of you are young people who are teaching me things that I wouldn't have known otherwise. You are all something specific, something unique and beautiful. And what I want is for us to see that in each other. And this, I think, is some of how we get there. Thank you.
Thank you, Casey. In a few minutes, we will have our community sharing time when you can write into the chat or share in person about what resonated with you in this platform. While we listen to today's musical response, you might prepare by reflecting on a personal experience or an activity at WES that the platform brings to mind. Please distill your thoughts to a single idea that you can share for 1 to 2 minutes. And now, Keith Miller will be playing Alabama by John Coltrane.
Okay, first, thank you for having me here. Just want to say a couple words about this piece. This was John Coltrane's response to the Alabama church bombing in 1963 that killed the 4 young girls. He listened to Martin Luther King's eulogy for the girls, and as he listened to that, he wrote and performed this piece.
This is the time when we add our own voices to the morning, sharing our reflections on the platform or what resonates with our personal experience. For our online participants, I invite you to share in the Zoom chat or in comments if you're watching the recording later. If you're here in person, we're going to continue with our experiment with the conversation corner up front here with folks who'd like to share thoughts and feelings with each other in a little more depth. So can I see a show of hands of who might like to be part of that conversation? Great. So we'll see you over here, and other folks are welcome to join if they decide later. So I'm going to come around now for people interested in giving 1 to 2 minute responses. I'll bring the microphone to you if you raise your hand. We have just 10 minutes, so please keep your response brief. The others can share as well, and if you've spoken in recent weeks, please hold back to leave space for others, and then I will check back with the Zoom folks. So please raise your hand, and I will come around. Yep. Oh, and name and pronoun. Sorry.
Yeah, Carl, he, him. And I just want to talk about what KC said about 10-year-olds taking speech and completely stripping the meaning away from it. And that this is a thing that happens way faster now with the internet, but it's a thing that's been happening since language has existed. And I find it very useful sometimes to take a minute to think about the words that we say every day without even thinking, and to take a moment to just think about where they came from and what they actually mean instead of what we use them as. Just a thought.
Hi, Perry, he, him. Keith, thank you for your music today. It's wonderful to have you. This is not going to be a comment about the platform, but I have a joy and concern that I need to share now. Last night, Alita and I were in a bad car accident coming back. I picked her up at BWI, and we were on I-95 when a Camaro rear-ended us, pushed us into the next lane, and then hit us again as it was passing on the right side. The car protected us. We are not injured, thank goodness. So I want to say that partly just so that all of you get the same story right off the bat, but also, here's the joy part. Randy and Judy Myers dropped what they were doing on Saturday night to spend a couple of hours of their day rescuing us from the shoulder of I-95 and driving us home. So thank you to this community for giving us people we could call in a situation like that. And thank you to Randy and Judy. And no, Randy did not endorse this as a campaign ad for his Board of Trustees election.
Thank you.
Adam, he, him. Carl, you reminded me of one of my favorite quotes. It predates Socrates, one of his contemporaries who said, "The children these days no longer respect their elders. They something in the streets and speak only out of turn." This was 2,500 years ago. And I can find you examples in the historical philosophy literature from every single period since of somebody saying the exact same thing with no irony. It's amazing. Thank you for repeating it.
Josh, he, him. I'll say someone who has been the recipient more often than not of being called in rather than called out. The grace that folks have shown is, I would imagine, very difficult to do, but strengthens and shows. It's just an expression of vulnerability that is really powerful to me. To speak about the size and the shape of communities and how we interact with one another, I think that What to me is fundamentally different about internet communities is that they function structurally on attention, which is driven more by anger than community or love. And that's the only way structurally that they can exist, because of, they're an advertising-based thing, and it causes more internal isolation and anger than I think anything that we have ever created, really. And to me, that's the real danger of that sort of community and extrapolating from it. And it's that to me, yeah. Sorry.
Yep, thank you. Peter, he, his, him. So, Casey, this was a wonderful, wonderful talk. I really appreciated what you said about it. But the one thing that I would like to add myself is that when I started reading the title and thinking about cancel culture, what I understand cancel culture to be is that right-wingers are busy complaining about, for the most part, professors in universities who are then complaining about what other people are saying, and especially other people who are trying to get jobs in the university, or who are coming to speak at the university, or are just talking about things in general. And so to my understanding is the right wing thinks that this is cancel culture when, frankly, when it comes to figuring out who should be on the faculty of a university, that seems to me to fit in what Casey was saying about the consequences of your speech. When it goes to the next level of where a university actually decides to cancel a talk that someone was supposed to give. Now, that seems to me that that's sort of like what was our other word there? Not cancel, censorship. That censorship, except it's not by an HOA, it's now by a university. And it seems to me that many of us think that it's better to just go around and raise the issues by the talk. Thank you.
Okay, I see two in front and then one in back, and then we'll get back to the Zoom.
So my mother grew up in West Virginia, and she wanted to be a social worker. And so she applied to social work school in West Virginia, and they told her she couldn't be there. So they paid for her to go to the University of Chicago. So I think she possibly won. And I'm here because my father was a pediatrician in Chicago, so they won and I got to be here.
Hi, I'm Karen, she, her, and even though my name is Karen and I am a cisgender, middle-aged white woman, and I do thank you for including that as part of your platform, what I really wanted to mention was I loved hearing about that the government was worried about WES being involved in anarchy, and the reason I... Huh? So I'm a member of the WES Chorus, and the last time we sang for Founders Day, we were we had decided to wear T-shirts that either were WES T-shirts or had something to do with social justice, and I didn't have a WES T-shirt. So from what I had two choices, and the one I ended up wearing was a T-shirt from Radio Victoria, which is a radio station in El Salvador that is deeply connected with our sister community of El Rodeo, and very involved in social justice. So I felt that was a good shirt to wear, and I still think that is true. But the one that I didn't wear is a shirt that was actually originally belonged to my father in his days of being a bumptious young man, that has a portrait of Emma Goldman. And I now feel morally obligated to wear that the next time I come to WES.
Hi, I'm Sue, she, her, and I just wanted to comment on the history of WES being followed by the FBI and CIA because they thought we were communist sympathizers. And unfortunately, I forget what the Russian word was, but there was a something party, and it was a Russian word. Well, it turns out it was a dessert with a Russian name. But they saw that we were having this party, so they thought we must be Russian sympathizers.
Hello, I'm Jackie, she, her pronouns. I just want to say I really appreciate that this is a space to have these kind of conversations, and much of what was spoken about on the platform I agree with. I am also incredibly cautious about using terms like cancel culture, using terms that are, as you mentioned, that come from generally when the mainstream, which the mainstream is generally white, it's also generally Southern and Middle Western, Midwestern, and it comes from this point at which there is resistance to attempts for people to rebalance the dynamics of power, right? So then the right wing kind of movements decide to create these words to describe what's going on from their perspective, at being disadvantaged in certain ways. And so there are terms that I don't use, like cancel culture or race card. There is no race card. No one can play it. And so I caution that we think really deeply about the terms that we're using and how we might fall into a conversation that's really steered to by people who are looking to regain power. And I'm also really on this kind of point at which I'm considering how much do I prioritize community versus power? And when I see people like the woman in Congress who used that term, that I thought initially my first reaction was, it's a little, it's coming down to someone's level to start to throw names, right? To start to throw terms, like the name that she used for the woman who's the woman who was really hateful, and I'm so unattuned to that, and I don't know her name. But my next thought, and I think the most important thought, is that I don't understand the position that she's in Congress every day doing the work that she does. And she said that it was many times of dealing with hateful comments before she lashed out, right? And so I think that it's really important to understand when people are using tools to regain their power, to get new power, is to really prioritize that conversation and to really look less into judging what that becomes. And what it becomes, for lack of a better word, bastardized as it becomes more mainstream and gets out into the world. And people start to manipulate what other folks are doing. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you. And as I transition up and check the Zoom, I personally wanted to add that if anyone has HBO Max and has seen the show Hacks, Jean Smart plays a comedian who is trying to adjust to moving away from the problematic sets of that got her popular in the past, but also still not quite comfortable with understanding. And she has a great relationship with her millennial writer. And while we don't all have the ability to hire writers to make us funnier and more appropriate, the relationship that they have, where they're able to talk and understand each other and work through options, I think is really inspiring. Judy Myers on Zoom, thanks Casey, says that I've learned so much, and wants to give a request that you find a curriculum development person or team who can turn this morning's platform address into a graduate level course, along with versions targeted to younger/less developed minds. I hope to listen to this talk multiple more times to try and distill my thoughts and tease out the amazing number of topics you translated for me. And Judy also adds in response to Perry about how wonderful it is to be a part of a community where we're able where we have the bonds we develop are such that it's an absolute given that when someone calls and has an immediate need, we'll definitely drop everything to come and support them. And she hopes to be able to join the conversation afterwards. Can I pop back to, yep, okay, cool. So thank you all for sharing your thoughts and attention. Just as we share our perspectives in this community, so too do we share our resources and gifts. Here at WES, we split all undesignated gifts in the Sunday collection between our operating budget and a fund dedicated to justice and compassion. Throughout the month of May, in keeping with our social justice theme of censorship, we will be sharing with Project Censored. Project Censored's mission is to promote critical media literacy, independent journalism, and democracy. They educate students and the public about the importance of a truly free press for democratic self-government. Censorship undermines democracy, so they expose and oppose news censorship, and they promote independent investigative journalism, media literacy, and critical thinking. You can check out projectcensored.org. Let's all take a moment to prepare to respond to the invitation to generosity as we are able. To donate online through the Breeze system, go to tiny.cc/wesgives or click on Give on our website, ethicalsociety.org. To donate in person, you can place cash or check in the basket in the back of the hall on your way out, and you can always send a check by mail. So thank you all for your generosity, and we will now receive your gifts and the gift of music with the song Revolution by Thank you all so much to the many people who helped create this morning's time together. Today's platform speaker, Casey Slack, and guest musician, Keith Miller. Staff members Indara Miles, Robin Kravitz, and Maceo Thomas. And of course, our platform production volunteers, the tech team members, slide artists, Zoom chat usher, and in-person greeters. I want to mention a few things coming up in the life of our community. So we know you've got some awesome mugs, maybe even a WES mug that looks like the mural outside. So whether they be funny, geeky, or stunning handmade works of art, get them out of the cupboard and into the spotlight by bringing one with you to platform each week for your coffee and tea at the West Sunday Cafe. Later today, we've got the Sci-Fi Book Club on Zoom, 1 p.m., and the Mental Health Support on Zoom at 2 p.m. You can see news and notes for links and more information. You'll also see some awesome reminders in the news and notes that you can directly click on, like if you'd like to volunteer for SEEK next year. SEEK, of course, is our Sunday Ethical Education for Kids. So next Sunday on June 2nd is our coming of age as the oldest of our SEEK folks kind of move up in the world, and we'll have music from the DC Labor Chorus. And then the following weekend, June 8th, is WES Prom. Tickets are still available if you'd like to party it up with all your WES friends. That Sunday, June 9th, after platform, we'll have a membership meeting and also be able to join a humanist booth at Capitol Pride downtown. June 16th will be the last session for Community Relations Committees Creating a Caring Culture series. We'll explore binary thinking in either or situations. And I believe we have a reminder for more activities from Sonia. Sorry. That.
Hello. Hi, I'm Sonia. My pronouns are she and her. Some of us are having a board game night here at WES on Wednesday. You're invited to come at 6:30 with your own dinner. So this is a BYO dinner event, and enjoy the company of fellow WES members while you eat your dinner. And then around 7, we plan to start playing some board games. Carl and I will bring some board games. You are welcome to bring your own board games, and I hope to see some of you there. Thanks.
I don't know about the rest of you, but I got my WES ballot for board of trustees this week in the email, so you probably should have too as well. It's going to be entitled from Election Buddy. You have until 2 p.m. on the 9th, I believe, to submit it. So please keep an eye out for that and send it in.
Okay, thank you. Multitasking is always appreciated. I believe that is all of the messages. I do want to always remind folks that if you see any typos or mistakes about your contact information in the Breeze account, please let us know. If you have still not gone into the Breeze account, great time to pop in and make sure that we have all the correct information. So that is it for announcements. As always, you can find information about opportunities to connect in the weekly news and notes email and the calendar page at WES's website, ethicalsociety.org. Again, if you are new to the community, please introduce yourself to a person in person or via the connection form, tiny.cc/WesConnects, or an email to wes@ethicalsociety.org. And at the conclusion of the platform, please join us for social hour, either here in person or on Zoom at tiny.cc/WesCoffeeHour. I now invite you to join in our closing song and closing words. Our song, of course, for the last time for May is We're Gonna Build a Boat by Katrina Nields and David Calfant, performed by Keith Miller. And now for our closing words. Let us go into the week ahead with compassion, understanding, and commitment, celebrating variety in the bouquet of our lives and resisting attacks on the free flowering of ideas. Thank you all for joining today's platform in person or remotely. We look forward to connecting with you again soon.